Welcome to the Soberish Uprising. My name is Holly Kay, a former heavy drinker who started her soberish journey about a year and a half ago, and everything in her life has shifted. On Soberish Uprising, we dismantle our beliefs about sobriety and drinking and booze and talk about finding freedom in a way that's really important to us. So today I am joined by my amazing friend Thuy who I know we can get into that, but I know her from really the retreat we went to a couple years ago and have been following her journey. And yeah, welcome, Thuy.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So she is a real estate investor, multi-passionate entrepreneur, hosting women retreats, working in heart healing, and just for me, a beacon of light. She's every time you see her, I know she has her low points, or she always is just a shining light. So thank you for being here.
Yes, of course. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And I mentioned how we met, but it was probably the end of March and you posted something and I was like, oh my God, you have to come and be on Soberish Uprising. Because you talked about this goal, even doing personal development, I think 7-8 years. And your goal was to be as fun and exciting and DGAF sober as you were with booze, right?
Yes.
And you would reach that goal. So first of all, tell me about why was that a goal for you, is to be as much fun sober as you were non-sober?
I had noticed that, all of us have different sides of our personality where, different friends bring out different parts of our personality and we're like sometimes different people, right? Or at least sometimes I felt like different people. And I didn't like always start off drinking, but it was just a situation where I noticed that when I did start drinking, there were certain occasions, or there were a lot of occasions where I felt like I was more fun to drink, or I required a drink to feel fun. And I'm like, I don't like feeling the dependency on something to be myself. Like, why can't I just be my best version of myself, my most fun version of myself without like liquid courage or whatever? And I was already like pretty fun anyway. I had friends who would tell me like, before I started drinking, they're like, are you not drinking right now? Like, because you're certainly acting like you're drunk. And I took that as a compliment because I'm like, great, because I'm uninhibited.
Right.
But once I did start drinking, it became a situation where I'm like, it just became like a dependency. And I'm like, I didn't want to have an external force that controlled that for me.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So tell me about, let me ask you, what does soberish mean to you? When you think of soberish, what is your definition of soberish?
Soberish is basically being more selective in when I drink and identifying myself as like an occasional drinker or like sometimes drinker, not in the sense of like, oh, I'm at the doctor's office and like, let me fudge my numbers because I don't want like her to judge me. Because, if I'm being honest, like even when I was drinking more frequently, like, whether I drank during the week or I only drank on the weekends, like if I would drink when I went out to the clubs and stuff like that, I would have easily like 10, 12 drinks in a night, even if I didn't have anything all week. So it's like, how often do you drink? Oh, just one day a week. But if I'm drinking 10 to 12 drinks a night, that's a lot. Or if I were to have 1 or 2 glasses of wine a night, like how does that go? So I always like just marked, I'm an occasional drinker, or I'm like a social drinker, because that's felt more socially acceptable. But soberish to me means like I'm just very selective, and I choose to be without alcohol. So like sober more often than I choose to have a drink in occasions, at occasions where I normally would have consumed alcohol.
Yeah, that's so interesting. That's so funny. I remember being at a doctor's office and like it came back and I had like higher levels of like my one of my
creatinine.
I think so. It's like whatever like is in your liver for drinking, right? And I was like, oh well, and I had hurt my knee and I was taking more ibuprofen, but it was the lie. I was like, no, it can't. She's like, do you drink a lot? And I was like, occasionally,
well,
and
it's a lot.
Yeah, I was like, what do you mean by a lot? And that's why I kind of lead with like a heavy drinker, because like it's 8 drinks a week. And that was easily if I'm honest about it, like that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
So It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and I feel like the judgment piece, whether it's self-imposed, although, in the personal development world, all judgment is self-judgment, but
Mm-hmm.
it was always fear of like, oh, is somebody going to judge me? Because I remember in my early
Mm.
20s, I felt better about the fact of only drinking on weekends
Yeah.
instead of drinking every day. And then I moved away from
Mm-hmm.
drinking more on the weekends, and then it became like an everyday glass of wine with dinner, or
Yeah.
and then it turned into a glass of wine while I was making dinner, and then a glass of wine with dinner, and then maybe a
Mm-hmm.
glass after dinner. Like I could easily finish a bottle by myself.
Right.
And I very often did.
Yeah.
And I didn't see
Yeah.
a problem with it. And before kids, I was like, I'm fine. It's cool.
Yeah. What was that? Well, talk about that judgment. When you say people are judging you, was it for not drinking, for drinking too much? Like, what was that judgment around for you?
It's both. So before I really started drinking like socially around 22-ish.
Okay.
And, most people, if they're going to be drinking, will start like really early, or like
Mm-hmm.
like on their 21st birthday, they go to Vegas and they go crazy, right? Like I
Right.
wasn't really that interested in doing that. I mean, I was still going out and doing stuff, but I just didn't like drugs and alcohol didn't appeal to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, in my mind, I'm like, well, what's it gonna do? It tasted gross to me, and what's it gonna do? And they're like, oh, it makes you have more fun, and I'm like, I already have fun without this, so why do I need
Yeah.
this? And so, there were certain people who are like, oh, it's cool, like, you're fun anyway. And then other people who would try to like peer pressure me into drinking,
Mm,
like, oh, come on, just like have a shot with me, and trying to be inclusive, but it's really, in hindsight, like I'm like, well, no, I think a lot of those people did feel they just wanted to bring me in on the fun. And, you want to,
mm-hmm.
if you're enjoying something as a human nature, I feel like we tend to want to bring other people in too, to also
Yeah.
enjoy that thing. So I didn't feel like it was judgment so much from people when I was like out partying in my early 20s, if not drinking. But I feel like in hindsight, like I'm thinking of a specific ex-boyfriend, for example, like, or a couple of ex-boyfriends. I remember I was telling my husband, we sat at the bar for dinner at like a Mexican restaurant, and he ordered a margarita. I ordered water, and I was recounting to him, and I'm like, oh, I had a flashback to when I was dating a
Mm,
guy. We would go to the bar, and I would order a water, and he's just like, you can't order a water at the bar. That's like sacrilege. And I'm like, what's the big deal? Like, we're going to order food. He's still going to get a tip. Like, I'm not just
right.
sitting here like drinking water and taking up space, but that's a whole other conversation. But like, I think he felt bad, where it's just like, oh, well, I don't want to be the only one drinking, because
Yeah.
then maybe I'll look like an alcoholic. And it's just like, who cares? Like, are you? So anyway, like his judgment on me was fear of judgment from other people, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it was an interesting thing. I
Yeah.
totally forgot your question. What was my
No, it's
tangent?
great. That's hey, this is how we roll. We're just two women talking. Well, and I love, we do know that, right? All judgment is self-judgment. And that really can come up, especially around alcohol, right? Because it makes people then start
Mhm.
to question, crap, if Holly and we aren't drinking, should I not be drinking? Like that,
Yeah.
that thought, which is what. And so tell me, you said you were you were drinking, getting, wine while making dinner, just this like habit that I think a lot of us, I know I definitely got into, right? Like it's
Mhm.
5 o'clock, off a glass, and before you're like, might as well finish the bottle and then
Totally.
recycle, repeat. So what shifted for you where you were like, hey, maybe this isn't working for me anymore?
It was really kids. Kids were the marker for
Mm-hmm.
me. I have 2 kids. I went the 9 months or whatever it was. 'Cause did I find out fairly early? Call it 8 or 9 months. I was
Yeah.
probably drinking that month before I knew I was
Yeah.
pregnant, but like 8, 9 months-ish. And so I would go that entire time, and I didn't miss it as much as I thought I would, because I had a
Mm,
reason, like a solid reason not to drink. And when you're pregnant, people aren't like trying to be like, "Well, why aren't you drinking? Here, have a
yeah.
drink with me." Like, I don't wanna drink alone. And by just kind of by default, like my husband drank less while I was pregnant, not out of like empathy necessarily, but it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, well, he's like, well, I'm not going to open up a bottle all by myself, because I'm
Right.
not going to finish it. So, and it was just one of those things. And then came the sleep deprivation from, or like just
Mm,
the tiredness of having a child. And then I started to, slowly get back into drinking again, got pregnant with my son, my second child. Same thing, like went the time without it. And I would even go on like wine tasting trips. that were like pre-scheduled. So for both pregnancies, I had wine tasting trips scheduled, and I
Oh, fun.
went because I enjoyed the company, and we were going to nice restaurants and stuff like that. And so I just went for the experience, not necessarily for the wine. And for the most part, nobody thought it was weird because I'm pregnant. Although, funny enough, during, I forget which pregnancy it was, I wasn't like obviously showing yet. And there was one guy at a winery who was like, how many glasses? And, it was like, call it 10 minus 1. It's like 9 people. And he's like, who's not drinking? And you could tell it like bugged him so much. And he just like, and he would like hint at it. And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you, like, it's my choice not to drink whether I'm pregnant or not. Like, you can leave the judgment. I'm like, this is coming from a dude who's like working at a winery. Right. But anyway, it was just interesting, again, going back to the judgment piece. But so after kids, going back to your other question, with my son, he did not sleep very well. My daughter, I had sleep trained by the time she was 3 months old. She was sleeping through the night. So that was like an easier transition. With my son, he didn't sleep through the night until he was like either 1 or 2 years old. So it was a long, extended period of time for me to be waking up like multiple times a night. And for me, the priority was to feel rested and or to not feel like shit.
Yeah.
I cuss on here. Because I'm like, I'm too tired, and anything that's going to mess with my sleep, I don't want to mess with it. And I'm like, I was like so exhausted, and I'm like, drinking will only make me more tired, because I knew what the pattern was. Like, theoretically, I would fall asleep more quickly, but if he's waking me up multiple times a night, then I'm going to be even more, I'm going to be hungover / drunk on top of that. So like, and then the hangover started getting really bad. So it just, and with the note that it would get bad even if I had like a half a glass of wine. So it didn't necessarily was like, oh, well, obviously if you're drinking a bottle of wine by yourself, you're going to have a bad hangover. Yes. And I also can have that same feeling of a hangover being so bad, and it would extend sometimes to like a 2-day hangover and maybe even a 3-day hangover. And it's just like, it's not worth it to me to do that.
Oh, there's so much goodness in what you just shared. And I think it's, we talked a couple weeks ago about this conversation, and like what you have to want something more than you want that other feeling, right? It's that conscious decision of like, yes, I can have this glass of wine and I can feel like shit tomorrow, or I cannot and feel great tomorrow. So like, what's important to me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that also plugs into like what you had said is, if I have this glass of wine, I'm giving up sleep, and that's not something I'm willing to give up.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear, like, you talked about being a parent, but as an entrepreneur and a woman who's growing her business and doing all sorts of amazing work in the world, like, how has that come up for you?
It's come up a lot. I mean, in the sense of, I remember there was one point in my career, I forget if it was like in my sales career or during or after I quit like my corporate thing, but I remember like not wanting to give up my fun once I associated drinking with fun or being fun or having fun. Because I'm like, I want to go out and have fun tonight, and therefore I would almost like quasi unconsciously hold myself back and like not go for that bigger thing, because then I'll have more responsibilities, and then I'll have like a team that I need to take care of, and I'll have like, can I be a successful business owner or like team leader and be hungover all the time, or like, have this, or like not be able to, like, because part of the hangover is like my brain, I'm just like so foggy and I'm tired and I'm unmotivated, and it's like, I just don't want the responsibility, that lack of freedom. So like I wanted the freedom to drink and not have consequences with it. Because again, in my early 20s, like the hangover was minor. Or if I did have a hangover, I could spend the entire next day, like, which is what we used to do a lot. We would go out on Saturday, and then Sunday we would just stay home playing video games. That's not really an option for me anymore with 2 young kids. I mean, I could, stick electronic babysitter, but even that only lasts for a few hours.
Yeah.
So I've tried. So it's just like, it's just not worth it to me anymore.
Yeah. Oh, it makes total sense. And and I love it, you have a Facebook group. I think it's like Recovering Perfectionist, right? So tell me, how did your perfectionism, what was its relationship with drinking? Or was there a relationship between perfectionism and drinking?
So I feel like perfectionism and people pleasing are kind of like sisters, maybe two sides of the same coin.
Mm-hmm.
And with the perfectionism, I'll say, for example, or like, yeah, with the perfectionism, there was like an image that I wanted to maintain, right? So for like outside forces, so like to my parents, I didn't want them seeing me drink and knowing that I drank and stuff like that. Even as like a grown adult, I hosted an event at my house, and I was just freely drinking champagne. And my dad made a comment like, "Wow, you drink champagne like it's water." And I'm like, ah. Like if anybody else would have said that, I would have been like, yeah, like I'm fun. But it was my dad, so I was like, oh yeah, I don't think that's like a positive thing.
I don't think that's a compliment.
Yeah. But so there's like the dual-edged sword where it's just like with my friends and stuff like that, because I had friends who I would drink a lot with, and then I had friends who don't drink, or like we do stuff without drinking, and or drinking, our activities and stuff aren't centered around drinking. So the perfectionist is like, okay, so that image of wanting to be that perfect daughter, like, and the perfect daughter, or like the perfect mother. Oh, a proper mother like doesn't drink. She always has her like stuff about her. Or like, a woman. God, I heard a saying a while ago, but it was just like a woman. I'm going to put it a lot less eloquently, but it's like a proper woman always has her shit together. And somebody who's drinking is not always going to have their shit together, like mentally. So that was just the perfectionism, I think, goes in there. And then the people pleasing, although peer pressure, you and I talked about this on our call, like I think peer pressure, the people pleasing are, again, it's like all very intertwined. But the people pleaser in me, like I'm a recovering people pleaser, yet peer pressure never really worked on me. So it's a very interesting duality, because I would think that if you're a people pleaser, then you're super susceptible to peer pressure. But when people would try to peer pressure me into drinking or, anything like that, it just never, I'm just like, no, not interested. No, thanks. So that was, yes and no, as far as them being related.
Yeah, and we talked about that, right? Because you had shared you were, about peer pressure, and I was like, no, I do feel like I'm a recovering people pleaser, but I was like, I definitely don't like peer pressure. You try and peer pressure me, I go the other way, right? I'm like, that's like totally. I can't be talked into it. It's like just digging my heels inside. I thought that was like, I'm still processing that. I'm like, how does that work? Like, how does that?
So part of it is freedom is one of my highest values. Yeah. So, totally. Which I feel like that's a whole other separate conversation with alcohol, but because alcohol, I feel like gives you the perception of freedom, but it actually changes you from like the chemical addiction side of things. But because freedom is like, I think, a higher priority for me, or like a higher value for me than people pleasing, because people pleasing is a learned behavior for me, versus freedom is something that I think is just innate in me. Like, do not tie me down. Do not make me commit to something. Like, it needs to be my choice, my decision, like my terms. And when it's not, I'm just like, like, it's okay. Maybe, no, I mean, I was going to say, maybe I was just never peer pressured by the right people, but but it was my peers, my friends who I had fun with and I went out with all the time. And no, it was fine.
Yeah.
Like, really I just didn't feel like I had anything to prove.
Yeah. So where are you now on your kind of sober-ish journey? Like how do you decide, like, what is your mechanism for saying, yes, I'm going to partake? No, I'm not.
When you think about really instance by instance. So it has to do with just, is it a full moon? Did I sleep last night? Did I? Because sometimes like I'll feel like drinking. And so then I will typically take a step back and like help. I want to understand why I want to drink. So do I want to drink because I'm stressed and or the kids did something to annoy me and I'm letting it get to me, or I'm feeling resentful? Like last week, the kids were on spring break. I took a bunch of time off, and then it started to get to that point where I was like feeling resentful. And then I'm just like, okay. And then I felt like drinking a lot more. And then it's like, the more I've done personal development, I'm able to identify, like, I want this drink because I want to suppress my emotions. I don't want to feel, I
Mhm.
don't feel like dealing with whatever emotions are coming up right now. And then consciously knowing that, that really has me take pause to like, do I really want to drink to suppress, or
Mhm.
like this is a good opportunity for me to actually learn to feel my feelings and process
Yeah.
stuff instead of just like stuffing it down. So I I mean, I still do occasionally, but
Mhm.
I am much more conscious about it. And when I identify it, I tend to like refrain more,
Yeah.
because I don't want to drink from a disempowered place, as
Mhm.
opposed to just because I feel like it, it's
Yeah.
just like it, I, I don't mind so much when cause I was gonna, yeah, there is no like rhyme or reason. Cause sometimes I feel like
Mhm.
it just because I feel like it, not because I'm sad, not,
Yeah.
or it's just like a nostalgic kind of thing. I used to have a thing where it's just like between 4 to 6 p.m. ish. I would like, I think it's almost like a circadian rhythm type thing,
Mhm.
where it's just like, oh, I want a drink. But if I didn't have a drink, then by the time 6 o'clock hits, if I didn't have
Yeah.
it, then I'm like, I'm fine. I don't want it
Yeah.
anymore. Um, and typically, but it might be, yeah, it just depends on my mood
Yeah.
at the end of the day. Like, oh, do I feel like celebrating? Like for my daughter's birthday party, I didn't drink the entire time, even though like I poured myself a glass and then it just sat there and I'm like, eh.
Mm.
And then sometimes it's just kind of the habit of
Yeah.
drinking, I find, where it's like I don't actually want the beverage itself, but I want the memory of the feeling that's
Yeah.
associated with having that beverage.
Yeah. And
So,
oftentimes that feeling we think is the alcohol, but really it's the moment we're in, the people we're with, that
mhm,
it's just it's tricky. Like it's really tricky, right? Because you're like, yeah,
yeah,
but then when I love that too, that like maybe are you drinking to hide something, to like is it disempowered or is it empowered? Because it feels totally different. And especially,
mhm,
when you're really conscious, you're like, ooh, maybe I don't need to drink just because I'm really sad or I'm mad at somebody, like, or I really want to have a nice glass of wine because it's a beautiful day and like it feels really powerful, right?
mhm,
So I
yeah,
love,
and
thank you for sharing that.
yeah, and my husband and I like to go to nice restaurants, so
Hmm.
well, very often if there's like a wine pairing, and I mean, I haven't had like a hard alcohol drink in several years, just because,
Mm.
again, the whole hangover thing. But like I used to love margaritas, and like we've
Mm.
been to Mexican restaurants, we've been to parties that they have like a margarita bar, and like, and it's like they have a margarita that like the old me would have liked, but it's just like, like I'll look at it and it's just like, but it just doesn't.
Mm.
It's typically more in like a fine dining setting, because if it's
Hmm.
going to be like a spectacular glass of wine, then yeah, I'm going to want to have it, partly for the experience, partly
Yeah.
for the taste, and then because it can help to enhance the flavor of the food. Um, so yeah, it just does that. But half the time these days, when I pop open a bottle of like champagne, for example,
Mm.
it I'll have a half a glass
Yeah.
maybe, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm done. Like
Yeah.
it's not like hitting the spot of what I was thinking. And like you
Hmm.
said, I think it's just more of the association of everything else that
Yeah.
was outside of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I love it too, like being that really conscious. And it's really interesting. So today's like my 109th day without a drink, and it's the
Oh,
longest
cool.
I've ever gone. I've never been pregnant or never done anything. So it's like, I would like say it's my worldwide record. But it's so funny. Like I find times that I'm like, do you like in situations where I'd really want to drink? And it's been lately. So I don't know if it's just like been a long time. But that thought of, is it the drink you want, or is it that you just want to like spend time with people you care about? Or is it just that you want to like go sit outside, enjoy a nice patio day? And so just really like that introspection, I think is so important. If you're somebody trying to figure out, how do I adjust this? Like, why am I drinking? And do I really need this? Because like you said at the very
Hmm.
beginning, like I don't want to have to need something to show up as like what I think is like my best self, because it's not my best self.
Hmm.
We may think
Yeah.
it is our true self. So yeah, I think it's just a great kind of metric to say, like, why am I taking this drink? Like, what's the purpose of this?
Yes,
And that's in other
exactly.
things too, right? Like how much social media we consume, relationships, like just that good question of like the why.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah. And just understanding.
yeah. Well, and I know and this is kind of probably a hard question, but do I've known you for about 2 years now, and you've done so much amazing just in the time I've known you, transformation. Like, do you think that would have been possible to do at, if you were drinking at the rate you were years ago?
I definitely think it's possible. It would have slowed it down significantly
Mm-hmm.
because the trajectory that I've noticed is I'll grow, I'll have an up level, I'll have a growth moment
Mm-hmm.
or multiple growth moments. And because it's like sometimes I drink because I'm feeling down and I know it's going to like put me more down. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I drink because I'm feeling happy and I think it'll, or, in my mind, it like
Yeah.
makes me more happy. It like enhances the happy, right? And then for a long time, it would it would be fine the day of, and then whether it's the next day or the day after that, whether it's like a 1 day hangover, a 2 day hangover, or if it's not like a full blown hangover, I might
Mm-hmm.
just still feel like some residual effects of it.
Yeah.
For example, you know, I'm not like, I don't have a pounding headache, but I still feel like groggy because I didn't get
Mm-hmm.
that like solid night of sleep. Um, and then when I'm tired, I'm more likely to say like snap at my kids for doing
Yeah.
something that is like probably age appropriate, but my patience level is thin because I'm tired. So I
Mm-hmm.
do that. And then I go into judgment mode. And then that instance, I go into self judgment mode.
Mm-hmm.
And, self judgment for me, I think it's like a form of self sabotage and resistance because
Mm-hmm.
I go into self judgment mode. It's like, oh God, like, they didn't deserve that. Like, they were
Mm-hmm.
just being, kids. Like, and then I might feel bad about that. And then, you know, just go into this downward spiral of like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm such a shit, and like the rabbit hole, right? Like, oh, I'm
Oh
such a
my
shitty
gosh.
mother. Like, oh, it's probably because I was drinking last night. Why did I drink last night? I know what
Mm-hmm.
happens when I drink, and then it just becomes like this whole thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and so then I stay in this like down slide for however long, and
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes I'll eventually like pick that back up on the personal development side and like working towards my goals. Or maybe I put it down long enough because I'm willowing in my own pity party for long enough that like I just completely lose motivation to
Yeah.
like continue that project.
Right. Oh, thank you for sharing that, because I think that like cycle, right? And it's like the self-judgment is like way worse than like the physical hangover, right? Is that
Yes.
judgment, and then it's like, I'm a shitty mom, I'm a shitty human, I can't do anything right. Why are you trying to start a business? And like
Yeah,
just this whole, before you know it, you're just like this what like the judgment of the judgment of the judgment of the judgment. And
totally.
then
It's like, how
you're
can I
just
handle
cycling.
all of this responsibility? And does this mean that
Yeah.
if I'm going to be like this crazy successful business person that I'm never going to get to have any fun anymore? Well, then
Mm,
I don't want to sacrifice having fun if that means I'm going to
yeah.
like I'd rather have fun than to be rich. And it's just like all these stories
Yes.
that we make up. So, yeah, it's
And we're
interesting.
tired and we're not fully present, so it's like everything is, it's like if you're, if you're hungry, what do they say, like get a snack or take a nap, and you'll, most of the time that helps
That's
something,
funny.
right? But it's like, oh yeah, maybe I was just hungry, or maybe I was tired, but you're not able to like process through it when you're a little
Yeah.
hazy and stuff. So, well,
Hmm.
tell me, when you talk about, I love this idea, because again, this is Soberish Uprising is all about like really being honest with yourself, making conscious decisions about what works for you around booze, right? And we're all different. So for
Hmm.
you, when you think of defining success as a businesswoman, as a mother, as a wife, as a friend, as all these roles you play, how, when you think of defining success for like that, can you, what does that look like in relation to alcohol? Like, does that shift anything for you?
I think it's going to be a very, very personal decision because
Mm-hmm.
my version of success is not going to look like your same version of
Right.
success. Like, in one obvious sense of like, I have two kids, you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, my priorities are going to be different because, and I envy your life a lot sometimes. um, but there's like, so it's like, part of my success is my relationship with my kids and
Mm-hmm.
just my relationship with like just certain people, right? Like, I know you've got a brother, I've got like a brother and a
Mm-hmm.
sister,
Yeah.
and like, you know so again, just success is going to look different to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And also like the financial success, my financial
Mm-hmm.
success goals. Because even if I look at myself, right, like
Mm-hmm.
the Thuy, so I'm 39, I turned 40 this year. So the Thuy, like the 20-year-old Thuy, like
Mm-hmm.
would have defined success as who I am right now. Like even the
Mm-hmm.
30-year-old Twee would
Yeah.
have been like, oh my God, like that's so successful. Like I got goosebumps, like, holy shit, like
Mm-hmm.
what?
Oh, I love it.
And now, like, the 39-year-old version, 39, almost 40-year-old version of me has a very different definition of
Yeah.
success, because like the 30-year-old version and the 20-year-old version, it was very heavily on money. And now
Mm-hmm.
this is more about like time freedom, financial freedom,
Yeah.
obviously. And then just like emotional freedom, like, because
Mm-hmm.
we're in, we've done a lot of like the personal development growth track. And
Mm-hmm.
so like how I feel the entire time is going to be really important too. Cause
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
had a sales career where, I made like good money, but I had a whole lot of fun doing it. And so it's just like, I probably could have made more, but it was okay because I was just having so much fun.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like it balances out. And then I've also stayed at like the corporate job where I loved my coworkers so much, the
Mm.
job, not so much. So, but like my love for just kind of the company and the people had me stay longer than logically
Yeah.
I would have thought that I would have stayed. So again, it's
Mm-hmm.
all about like the mix and
Yeah.
what's important to you at the time. So,
Yeah.
but
Oh, I
in
love that.
short
Like that.
answer, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like the financial freedom, the emotional freedom, all those freedom, which freedom is your highest values, and that it is in different buckets.
Mhm.
And I think what I'm hearing too is, and that's your conscious decision to say, hey, am I partaking? Is this going to affect my emotional freedom, my financial freedom, my relationship freedom? And then you're like, that's kind of a good barometer to be like, no, I'm good. I'm totally gonna have that great glass of wine or two. Or
Totally.
and I may have a hangover, and that's like a consequence I'm willing to take for this
Yes,
experience.
exactly. And it's worth
Like,
it.
yeah, and that
Yeah.
consciousness. Well,
Because
tell
I
me.
mean,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, and part of like the freedom thing is freeing myself from obligations
Mm,
that the former people pleaser perfectionist would still say yes when she wants to say no. And so one of those things, like I had, and this is before I like was consciously not drinking as often, but I realized
mm,
that I had groups of friends that like I only wanted to hang out if we were drinking. Like if we're not drinking, we have nothing in common. And I just like I just don't.
yeah,
So now it's more about like what feels aligned to me. Like what's a
yeah.
10 out of 10? Like is it an automatic yes as soon as I get the question?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it like, oh, I don't really want to, but I should?
Ooh, yeah,
Um, and so that's kind of where and that's kind of that same concept that I apply with alcohol, like, and again,
mm-hmm.
could be related to the peer pressure concept is like, if I'm drinking because I feel like I should, then that's like, no, that's an
Yeah,
automatic no for
yeah,
me. But if it's because I want to,
yeah,
because I want to make my own choices, because I'm so like freedom based and
yeah.
I'm stubborn. um, but that's just where, yeah, that's really important to me.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Well, tell me, before we kind of wrap up, I've got kind of two questions. One, you've got this women's retreat coming up.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit more about what that's going to be like.
Ooh, thank you for asking. So
Yeah.
it's going to be 2.5 days.
Okay.
We're going to be doing it in Ojai, California. And it is, so Ojai I picked in part because it's literally like a magical energy vortex. So we've got
Mm,
like all the energies and stuff, but we're basically going to combine, mindset work. So mind, body, heart, and energy.
mm,
Because as humans, we're multi-dimensional people, and there are different layers where it's like, if you only do mindset work, that's not
mm,
like going
mhm.
to help with the trauma that you have trapped in your body from years and years and years of suppressing your emotions, right? Or doing stuff because you feel obligated and
Yeah.
not because you want to. Um, and so we're doing like a different combination. So, and I'm in the process of getting my heart healing certification,
Very cool.
which I haven't actually announced yet. So if you're
Mm,
watching this,
awesome.
surprise.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So like, there's going to be that, because that has like the heart component and just different things
Hmm.
like that. But the idea is to just really help people understand who they are, and then identify, what were the events or things in their lives that created these certain behaviors, like adaptive behaviors that they might have. And then giving themselves permission to shine, like through inner child work, through energy work, through just, again, and then just to have practical strategies. Cause I remember I would leave retreats like on this high, and then it's just like, okay, now what do I do that we've entered the real world?
Yeah. Like now that I'm out of my cocoon, now what happens?
Yeah. I'd almost have like a retreat hangover, and it's like, here
for
is
sure.
like a bunch of stuff. So
that's
that's where
amazing.
I wanted to leave. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'll put in the notes how to find you. I know you're on Facebook, Instagram. Can you give that information to us?
Yeah, it's a Thuy fibbed, which is going to be difficult for people
we'll put that down.
to do. But and then it's at Thuy PS 119 on Instagram. And it's Thuy is my name is on the thing. So or actually, my name. Yeah. There are no other Thuy fibbed in the world.
I bet not. There's no Holly Kabaka pitches either, so that I know of. Well, and one last parting, we'd love to hear again these conversations are inspiring other people just to make a change with on their terms. If somebody's listening and they've related to the story you've told, what would maybe be one insight, one tip of advice you would give to somebody listening?
Do you. At the end of the day, if you want to drink because you want to drink, do it. If you're doing it because of outside forces, whether it's you feel like you should, or peer pressure or whatever it is, or it's something to consider. So just do you.
Do you.
If you want to have a drink, don't feel bad. If you do have a drink, don't feel bad. Unless you get to the point that you're drinking and driving and you hurt people and stuff like that, then that's a whole different story.
This is I'm always hopefully clear that this is the space for people that are in this gray area of wanting to do things differently and are just how do I do that? So I think that's great. And ignoring the don't fall for any shoulds, right? We all know that. So thank you so much for joining me. I have seen you multiple times, and you literally are always have a huge smile, and you're always giving hugs, and you're dancing, and you're joyful, and somebody who does not need booze to have a good time. I've seen that. So thank you for shining your light, and thank you for coming on and sharing your story. Thank you for tuning in, everybody who's listening. Please give us a follow, a review. Would love to hear from you and how this story inspired you to maybe make a little bit different decision around your drinking. So thank you for tuning in, and remember, everything you want lies on the other side of saying no to that drink. Have a great day.
Bye.